let's look at a few equations where we need to solve for x involving x squared and the square root of x. So, for example, if I have the equation 2x squared minus 5 equals 11. Okay, now first of all, when we have an x squared, our first step would be to isolate the x squared part. So first, I'm going to add 5 to both sides. So I'll be left with 2x squared equals 16. The minus 5 and the plus 5 would add up to 0, so that's gone. 11 and 5 is 16. Now I'm going to divide by 2. So if I divide both sides by 2, on the left, I'm left with x squared, and on the right, I am left with 8. 16 divided by 2 is 8. Now, so that I don't have this squared here and I have just x equals, to cancel out the x squared, I'm going to do the opposite of squaring something, and that would be taking the square root. So if I take the square root of both sides, the square root of x squared is just x. So it's like the square root and the squared cancel each other, and I'm just left with x. On the right side, I'm left with the square root of 8. Now, technically, this is actually plus or minus the square root of 8. And I'm going to calculate that right now. And I'm going to round 2 decimal places. So 2.83. Okay, so in some applications, it makes sense to just say positive 2.83. But technically, negative 2.83 would also be an answer, because even if we just go back up to this step where we had x squared equals 8, if we take negative 2.83 and square that, we're going to get about 8. Maybe not exactly 8 because of our rounding here, but if we kept the whole entire decimal, we would get exactly 8. So negative squared, a negative times a negative is positive. Now let's also do an example where we have the square root of x. The square root of x equals 7. And we want to solve that for x. So in this case, we don't have to do anything to isolate the square root of x part, but I do now want to cancel this square root, so the opposite of the square root of something is squaring it. That would be the opposite operation. So if I square both sides, the square root of x squared, the square root and the square cancel, and I'm just left with x. But whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So 7 squared, I get 49, which if we plug it back in and we think about the square root of 49, yes, that is 7. So my answer would be 49.